the past few years and the last few months have felt like walking on water. Now, before you get the idea that I'm either comparing myself to Jesus the Christ, the Son of God, and humanity, or that I've felt so light and effervescent, I need to tell you that is not the case. By walking on water, I mean navigating the wind and the waves of life. Thrust upward, only to be left falling downward as the surface drops from underneath my feet. Swept to left, it's my left, by the way, and then swept all the way right. Smacked forward and backward by liquid turned solid by force and velocity. You know, waves are not your friends if you're not prepared for them. There's no way to extricate myself from this unending sea of waves and wind. It's water as far as the eye can see. I fear something swimming just close enough, but beyond my ability to see through murky water to prickle my skin with its sinister swish, swish, swishes right below my feet. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's an eerie little feeling when there's a creature right below you. The threat of doom leaves its own trauma. My other fear is becoming so waterlogged that I forget my real needs, that I confuse swallowing seawater for satisfying hunger, that I just become one with my environment, that I'll give up or forget to keep fighting. When humans go about just surviving, they end up learning how to just survive and forget that life is so much more than just surviving. You know, after a few years, it just starts to feel like that's what you're supposed to do, is just make it. Just get through one more day, right? And that makes sense. That's a point of comfort. Just get through one more day. But did you know that we're supposed to live? I feel like maybe over the past few years, it's been harder and harder to remember that, right? Everything right now feels so unstable, and nothing seems to satisfy. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3, 1 through 4. I love Genesis 1 through 3. Those are my favorite 3 chapters. And in fact, if you really wanted to know a shortcut to read the Bible in a sitting, just read Genesis 1 through 3. That's everything. The rest of the pages is just teasing out Genesis 1 through 3. Okay, so anyway, that's my little tip. It's a little tip. So here, early in Genesis, we are offered a story well known to us. Moses, who's the traditionally assumed author, okay, tells us that after God created Adam, God brought Adam into the garden. Okay? Genesis 1 says it differently. Genesis 2 is a second creation narrative. Okay? Genesis 1, Genesis 2, 2 creation narratives. You don't need to slam them together and try to smooth over the rough patches to get them to work together. They don't have to. They're 2 separate stories. So in Genesis 1, Adam is created in the garden. In Genesis 2, Adam's created outside and then brought to the garden. Okay? So God brought Adam into the garden. Here, Adam was to work and care for creation. God gave Adam 2 commandments. Eat from any tree, but do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from that tree. 1 tree. All the trees at Adam's disposal. 1 tree. Don't eat of it. Consequence, in that day you eat of it, you will surely die. From our perspective, this command seems astounding. Okay, and the consequence, atrocious. Like a bit dramatic. Okay? Why would God implement such a command and consequence? Why would the acquisition of the knowledge of good and evil be punished severely? Why is God keeping this power from us? That's sort of where our mind goes. Well, isn't the knowledge of good and evil something superior and worthy to have? Right? Why am I going to be threatened with death if I partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? One of the issues is our evaluation of good and evil. These are not just moral executive decisions. That's how we sort of classify this. Do good, don't do evil, right? According to the JPS Study Bible, which is the Jewish Publication Society Study Bible, we have to reframe our understanding of knowing away from a post-Enlightenment scientific revolution outlook to one that offers a more holistic picture of knowing. Okay, we look at this as if it's human beings, neutral, good, bad, and we should choose between the two. That's not real. Okay, you're not neutral. Okay, you have as much swirling good and evil as the material objects outside of you have. Okay, so we need a more holistic picture rather than the human person being this like objective, neutral Switzerland decider between good and evil. And surely if I have the knowledge of good and evil, then that helps me always choose the good, because right, you always choose the good, always, when you know it's the good one. Right? Yeah. How many of you were told at some point in their childhood that they should eat their vegetables? Okay, so you're all laughing, so you're all guilty. I actually chose salad, but that's why I'm a priest. I'm ontologically different. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not. You know that by now. I am not. All right. So we know intellectually, but we also know experientially. Therefore, there is not only knowing about good and evil, but knowing morally good and evil, and even more knowing through experience things pleasant and painful. It starts to change why God says, don't eat of that tree, for surely you will die. Okay? And in these experiences, in this knowing morally and even knowing about good and evil, there is death. It's not so much a punishment as it is a consequence of finding ourselves suffering in the midst of good and evil, pulled this way and that, torn through with doubt and inner conflict, suffering from, even unto death, the force of evil in the world. It's not that God's all, if you eat of that tree, I'm going to smite you. It's more that when you do, you're going to suffer. You will die over and over and over again. How many of you have been stuck between a decision, not apples and cake, all right, maybe that's a big one for you, but a decision where you feel so torn that you would rather not have the choice? Isn't that a death? What if you are so torn with remaining somewhere or leaving and you can't make the choice and you can't, that tension, you feel that death? Or when you are walking along, you are a box on a road on Broadway and a car nicks you, right? Like you're just an innocent box sitting there minding your own business, and then something happens, you will know that this is not supposed to happen, right? In the knowledge of good and evil, it's not an easy walk. This is what God is saying. When you eat of it, you will surely die because it's going to be painful. Okay? And by the way, God says secretly to God's self, you're going to confuse them. Right? Okay? Did we put Barabbas on the cross or did we put Jesus on the cross? Look at us. We knew what was good and evil, didn't we? The cross is always the biggest highlight that we cannot, even with a bunch of philosophy, figure out what is truly good and what is truly evil. Okay? The cross will always expose that. That's what I said. Just read Genesis 1-3. It's there. God is saying, you will surely die because you're going to muss it up. It's going to be gross. It's going to be pretty bad. and you're going to suffer, and you're going to know the distinction, and you're going to choose not to do it. Romans, right? I do the things I don't want to do, but I do and I don't do the things that I do want to do, and I'm torn up all inside. The whole entire Second Testament is like a testament to this death because of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? Does that make sense? Do you know that I'm trying to disabuse you of the idea that God is like out to smite people who can discern good and evil? It's not the case. We die our own deaths, it being caught between them. Okay? Then enter the serpent. I love the serpent. I think that there's like always like a glimmer and a smile going on when the serpent's speaking. In chapter 3, Moses tells us the serpent comes along and strikes up a conversation with Eve. You'll notice I'm also refusing to say the woman, okay? Because the language of the woman has caused the woman to suffer because she is blamed for the downfall of humanity, okay? And that is not the case. So I'm just gonna give her a name, or we're gonna call her Eve, and then I'm gonna have a little bit more fun with it, okay? The serpent asks a trick question. Did God say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? Did you guys catch that? I swear, I have studied these two chapters a lot. In fact, I wrote my first master's dissertation on Genesis 2. Literally last week, I realized, oh, he asks, did God say you can't eat of any tree in the garden? It's such a weird little question, okay? It's meant to trick her. There's no yes or no here, and Eve knows it. She can't say yes, she can't say no, because there's been this weird distinction between all the trees and that tree in the middle, right? So she says, she replies to the serpent and kind of opens up the answer, okay, which was going to give that serpent a little bit more leeway. And I'm doing the snaky moves, but the snake in there and get a little bit different, right? So Eve says, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. So no, God didn't say you can't eat of any tree. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. As she quotes the law differently than it was handed to Adam, okay, you shall not eat of the tree, or surely you will die. She says, eat or touch, okay? No reason why she adds she not to touch it, okay? Apart from the fact that she didn't receive the law directly from God. Who received the law? You can say it. Yeah, or I like to call him the man. Where does Eve get the law from? The man. It's wrong. It makes sense though, because I have said, don't eat the cake don't even think about it. Don't even think about touching it, right? You know, as a parent, you've used the words, don't eat it and don't even touch it. Okay? I can imagine that simple little thing, but what happens is in the process of communication, there's already alteration on what God has said. No, you can touch that tree all you want. That's not the case. It's eating it, okay? As she quotes the law differently than it was handed to Adam, the serpent can certainly show her that she can touch it without dying, okay? And in the JPS Study Bible, one rabbi actually wrote that the serpent reached out and grabbed the tree and shook it, letting fruit fall. I'm alive. Okay, that's a wonderful little image, okay? And what? No, it's just a fruit, which is why I keep trying to say fruit. Okay, chronologically speaking, if we're gonna take the biblical stories for any grain of mythological truth, okay, what happened to the garden when Adam and Eve were thrown from it? It was shut down. Closed, out of business, right? Scary, life-threatening cherubim, not the fat babies in diapers with heart arrows, scary angels located at all the entrances. No one's getting back in. Have we had any of the fruit that was ever in the garden? No, it can't be an apple. It literally, materially cannot be an apple. Otherwise, I am in trouble because I eat apples almost every day. right? So don't worry, we've never had that fruit. We've never had that fruit, okay? So back to this, okay? So here we have, just let me find my place, chaos and conflict with what one knows and sees, and the inner doubt over divine credibility surges, okay? Here's a command, God said, and then the serpent is shaking trees. And now but wait, he touched it and the serpent is clearly still living. So what is that? Okay. Then the serpent presses further, adding in just the right amount of potential divine jealousy. Seems God doesn't want you to have the same power God has, does it? Okay, the deal is sealed when she takes and eats of the apple and hands it to Adam, who was with her the entire time. Mr. I received the law straight from God, stood there and was like, we shouldn't eat it or touch it. That's what I said. Okay? He's not like far off. Sometimes it gets posed as that like Eve has this apple. That's what it says. And brings it to Adam and says, eat this, it's delicious. And innocent Adam is, okay, I will listen. No. Adam is right next to her. They're both being addressed, but the serpent struck up a conversation with Eve. They're both there. That hundreds of years of church history has blamed the woman is astounding. Okay? Is astounding. The one who taught her the law failed to teach it to her rightly and was himself subject to contemplating another word apart from God's word. Upheaval was already underway. Okay? Here the couple is thrust into tumult. What was is now no longer. They were comfortable, now they're uncomfortable. They were naked and fine with it, now they're naked and completely embarrassed. Okay? Here they are falling from true wisdom, to quote Martin Luther, since we sang our God is a mighty fortress, right? To quote Martin Luther, and they are plunged into utter blindness. The opposite of what you think happens when you acquire the ability to discern between good and evil isn't this wonderful enlightenment, but is now you are thrust into total blindness because now you have to discern which one is which, rather than taking it on good account through God's self that good and evil are determined. Okay? When we take it on ourselves to determine good and evil, it becomes a really muddy situation. Okay? They are now saddled with the weight of determining moral good and moral evil. They are held hostage by the onslaught of pleasure or pain, and they are chased by the threats of weal and woe. All of their relationships are now upended. Their relationship with God is now has fractures. Their relationships with each other now have fractures. Their relationships with themselves now has fractures, and with creation. All of it is now going to come under potential for abuse and violence and destruction. The ricochet of the sound of fracturing will forever be heard in the echo of lightning of the storm clouds, threatening doom, and in the rumble of hunger pains. So, don't worry, not much more left. How do we find stability in the midst of chaos and tumult? Okay, going back to the introduction, me feeling like I'm getting slapped around by a bunch of water. Okay, do we really forego peace and comfort until our leaders figure it out? I have a feeling we're going to be waiting a really long time for that. Do we run from each wave, hide from the wind? I know there's power of finding stability in yourself. I will never disagree with finding stability in yourself. Love yourself. You are worthy to be around by yourself, okay? But it only lasts for so long. One strong gust or undulation and it topples. When you are an isolated monad, one strong wave or gust will topple you, okay? No material object can ever offer us the stability we so crave. All of it is of the dust, and to dust it will return. It cannot provide that big existential satiation that we so desire. Material objects are finite things. Our existential crisis is infinite. We need an infinite thing to fulfill the infinite. You can't get enough material objects to satisfy the infinite. Does that make sense? Right? That's why when you locate your happiness in buying things, happiness is a big infinite thing, right? It has no boundaries. And you try to supply it with material things, you will start consuming. That's what we talked about on Wednesday if you were here. Consume until nothing's left. Finite things are finite. They can't fulfill infinite things. Okay? So anything that is of the dust is finite, and we try to fill those hunger pangs, that happiness, that need for existential validation with things. They'll never do it. They'll never do it. Okay? There's no job, no amount of money, no home, no relationship secure enough to depend on no matter what. That is what we learned through skepticism. Nothing is permanent, so nothing is permanent. Okay? We are all one precarious moment from a free fall. It's the truth. So if nothing seems to satisfy, how do we navigate this instability? We must look beyond ourselves and our consumption. We must be awakened to our deep-seated need and hunger for stability. Dorothy Zola writes this in her book, On Earth as in Heaven. There is a spiritual that begins with the words, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart. She writes, when I hear this song, I ask myself, when was the last time I felt the Spirit? And I would like to ask you, when was the last time you felt the Spirit move? On what occasion? Where? Why? When? The song, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, awakens my spiritual hunger. The hunger without which we can, of course, vegetate, but not live. Stability will always be found through and awakened in spiritual hunger. Spiritual hunger and need for God. Spiritual hunger will bring us back time and time again to the age-old story of unconditional love, resurrected life, and present tense liberation. It is here in this particular story where we are met and reminded of a covenant that runs steady. Genesis 3, we won't read it today. We won't read it next Sunday because we go straight to Genesis 12. But Genesis 3 harbors a what in it? You know? A promise. To Eve, you will bear a son, and he will crush the head of the serpent. You come back here to hear that every Sunday. Herein is our stability. It is here in this particular story where we are met and reminded of a covenant that runs steady from the beginning unto the end of time. It has no boundaries and can safely carry us to solid ground over and over and over again. Right now, I need God. Right now, God is my constant and my stability because God's story never changes. God in Christ comes low to walk with those who are hungry, those who crave stability and whispers, I will never leave you or forsake you. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how scared you are, I am with you. It's here where I'm brought further out of myself and my desperate attempts at false stability in material items and consuming until I am dead. I find true stability with you. Because you are the beloved of God, and God is where you are. God is where we are in the hunger.